So this week's episode of The Day I Became a God was, without a doubt, the most emotionally draining of the 5 episodes so far. This is a series that's always played around with the jokes and its comedic side, but it always has had a sadder undertone, especially when you have a character like Hina saying the world's going to end in 30 days. While yes, it's very difficult to believe a child saying that the world's gonna end, she's this prophet and she's actually Odin, this god, you can still see that this will be sad in some way if you have any experience with PA Works in June. That's kind of what happens. And when the man who is writing this project came off of a heart transplant to write this project, it's kind of clear it's gonna be sad. But to actually have the first real heavy moment be, in my opinion, on someone who was just a love interest, a passive love interest, didn't have a lot of emotion, didn't have a lot of character, she was just that stereotypical quiet girl. Kyoko was just that. She was quiet, she was passive, and it was kind of fun seeing our boy try to confess his love and never do so with grace. In this episode, we get to see what led her to be that type of person and actually characterize her in a way that makes her feel more compelling than just, here's the love interest that you'll never get. Rather, here's a broken child who lost her mother at a very young age, where her father locked himself away refusing to go outside, and here's a story of mending their broken family tree. While there definitely was a lot of bouncing around between the comedic side just right after you get a heavy emotional scene, I would say this is the most emotionally compelling episode to date, and if this is a good indicator where the more serious and sad storylines could go, especially when we focus more on Hina or even Yota and things like that, this show is going to be close to perfect for what I want this series to be. This is a show that still has my mind racing on what Hina actually is, and I'm going to assume she's a creation because we know there's a heavy technological aspect to the series. We are introduced to a hacker character who has technology ingrained into his brain, it seems like, who can hack into the entire world. It feels to me, based on last week's episode and all the information we got, it wouldn't be surprising if Hina is like a robot or a creation or something like that. She came from a facility. The world ending could actually just be her lifespan, things like that. I feel like that's definitely a likely possibility, but that still is just speculation. But based on the amount of information we've had on scientists and the whole idea of creations and technology and how great the technology is, it wouldn't be surprising to me if she was a robotic type creature, or if there is like a facility that's going to end the world and she knows of it, but also her own ticking time down in terms of her lifespan. Obviously, we'll have to wait and see. We have 11 days, I think, before the so-called end of the world. But as of right now, we're seeing her really take priority in terms of Yota's love life, but also helping people who can still be helped before this so-called doomsday. And to see a girl who really, I liked her, but I wouldn't, if you were to ask me who's the best written characters, it's Hina and Yota, without a doubt in my mind. They're the most fleshed out, the most interesting, and have the most personality that we haven't really seen before. In terms of someone like Kyoko, like, what is she? She's a quiet character. She's a passive character. She's who we've seen before. And to see that it's actually all because of a broken family and how she used to be a kind of like bratty, kind of like, she used to be a fairly bad kid. Not to the point that you'd want to lock her up in an insane asylum, but she was a troublemaker. And it's very interesting how when the mother was on her deathbed, she made a bunch of messages, and the father never showed these messages to his daughter. And it kind of makes sense when you realize the last message is saying, you know, you have to delete this video after you watch it. I don't know how any husband, any father could, in good conscience, do that. I feel like if I was in his position, exact same. Like, that's the only thing you can hold on to your past. And it's very interesting to see what her messages actually was. And it was about how she wanted the husband to move on, find someone else, and live a happy life, and wanted the daughter to make sure that she didn't get lost in sorrow, accurately predicting what would happen. And even though I definitely think that's probably what they needed to hear, I personally couldn't do that, absolutely not, but everyone's different, of course. But it's very interesting and sweet and bittersweet and wholesome and heartbreaking to see the escalation in the episode and how, once again, we have this girl proclaiming herself to be God, saying, I will get this man out of his house. Never has left his house before, and she actually was able to do so. There's a lot of comedy building up to that, and I think they had some fun once again with the art style shifts in the animation and just the insanity that we witnessed. It was great to see those comedic values really take hold, and it was interesting because you could argue that because of how many times we bounced around, here's a sad moment, and then right after, here's a funny moment, I actually thought they did so seamlessly, and I think the reason it helps so well is because it's a show that's constantly been beating us over the head with absurd moments. So even though when I'm like, oh, this was really sad, and now you're pulling me back to laugh, and now you're pulling me back into be sad, it actually worked for me. I could easily see how it could be distracting for a lot of people watching. You could argue and make good arguments on why bouncing around the serious and the really ridiculous just felt too jarring, especially when you're talking about a dead wife and a dead mother. But I honestly felt like they never used those comedic values to disregard the dead mother, the dead wife, but rather it was to elevate the current scene, not to disregard the past. So in doing so, it didn't feel like a distraction for me. And actually having him leave the house and actually recognize how much the world has changed, really indicating just how sheltered he's been since the death, and just even the moments beforehand where you have her just saying, like, once again, you're saying you'll come visit mom's grave, but you say that every year and you never do. It's like, this is such a sad situation, and it's very wholesome and sad to just build up to the moment where he reveals the tapes. And we have Hina talk about how, like, when you're talking on the phone, it's not your actual voice, it's, it's created, something that matches. And what's very interesting about this scene, when the whole magic cell phone gets revealed and she gets to talk with her mom, you don't see Hina's face. You just see her backside, and yeah, it looks like her, but to me, this is where it really does indicate there could be a robotic side to it, because we didn't see her face. Was something happening? Was her eyes glowing? Was there something we weren't supposed to see yet, or was it just a red herring? It does feel to me as if this is a character who is not completely human, if human at all, and the fact that we didn't see her face when she was talking on the payphone, like, why couldn't we have a frontal shot? Like, why do we have to see a backside shot? It does feel to me that we're building up to Hina not being human and more likely a robotic creation of some sort, and that's why she could perfectly capture the voice. She listened to the tape one time and said, "That's all I need." There is no way that this little girl was able to perfectly memorize the pitch and everything unless she has a computer-like mind that could actually capture the voice they heard and replicate it through her own dialogue. That feels to me like what happened, but either way, that robotic, weird scene at hand gave a girl, honestly, the magic she needed. You can claim she's ignorant, you can claim she's too childish, that she believed that it actually was her mother, but it doesn't matter. Everyone's going to have their own beliefs, and for someone who lost their mother at such a young age, it's no surprise with how sheltered she's been that she does still feel very child and innocent-like, and that's why that whole scene building up was just so great to me, and just the kind of reunion that they finally had and finally deserved. I think some people will probably once again say, oh, Yoda made a mistake, he didn't proclaim his love, but I agree with the guy here. If he would have done so, he guaranteed would have had a relationship there, but that wouldn't have been a relationship that felt like it was earned in the right way. He definitely is doing great things for her, but she was at her emotional weakest in a certain sense, and that's very easy to manipulate that situation for your own benefit. For him, he needs to have her at her normal state, where she's not overly emotional, and proclaim his love there. If he does so and she agrees to it, that's how you know the relationship will work, not something that she's on this emotional high and he can easily manipulate that to get whatever he wants. Obviously it was funny, but I definitely agree with his choice, even though it definitely was there to just prolong the actual will they won't they. It was the most realistic and most noble in my humble opinion. This was a great episode, the best episode, the most plot driven in my opinion, even though it wasn't necessarily on the end of the world plot, it was more on a personal character. It still felt to me like it was important and really showcases just how emotional this series can be, and I'm really excited for the future. As always, let me know your thoughts and feelings, and especially your theories down below. What do you think Hina is, and what do you think of the emotional pulls that this episode took? If you enjoyed the video, be sure to leave a like to show your support and hit that subscribe button if you have been new around here. So until next time, everyone, please take care and have a good one.